All right. Well, thanks for everyone joining us. If you want to go ahead and kick us off, Paul, I know we'll have people trickling in, but want to be respectful of everyone's time showing up on time. So,
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Groom. I'm going to be your tour guide and moderator for today's webinar. Before we jump in, it's a very full packed live demo experience, and it's with two of my absolute favorite cybersecurity experts in the field and in the space. With that said, the first piece of housekeeping is please keep in mind that the only silly question is the question that's not asked. We would like everybody to be able to go ahead and interact with today's session. The hosts may or may not engage you with questions. With that said, we would love to have the questions, any and all questions, loaded into the chat so that we can either pick them off as time permits at the end of today's call or send out a draft for everybody to be able to get their questions answered. At the end of our session today, Jeromie Jackson will be sending out a form questionnaire tied to the webinar. Our sponsor today, Spambrella, our Proofpoint sponsor, is going to go ahead and include a $10 gift card to Starbucks for anybody that takes the time to go ahead and complete the questionnaire. Without further ado, I would like to take a moment to introduce my good friend Jeromie Jackson. He's on the center screen. He's going to be kicking us off today's webinar with AI versus AI, and he's going to be the offensive side of the spectrum from how he's using artificial intelligence to enhance the offensive threat vectors you're going to see from him today. And then also presenting today will be Chris Jordan, the CEO and founder of Fluency Security. He's going to be demonstrating how artificial intelligence is used in the defensive portion of today's demo experience. And that's really going to be tied to SOC services and a unified security operations platform leveraging artificial intelligence. Jeremy, is there anything I missed in our kickoff?
no, I think as always, you nailed it, Paul.
Awesome,
Appreciate that.
guys. Enjoy the show. I'll let Jeremy take us away.
All right. Thanks, Paul. And if you could just validate for me, Paul, that you see my screen and you see the second slide.
Copy that.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah, so absolutely thank you guys for attending. Super excited to be sharing all things AI these days. So we've been spending a lot of time both on the offense as well as the defense side. So, there's a lot of governance theater out there these days, a lot of people talking about policies, but not really being able to gain visibility or any type of really defense capabilities around a lot of the things around AI. And so we're going to change, we're planning on changing that. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I noticed some familiar names on the attendee list and some new ones as well. So thanks for joining us. So if you're not familiar with myself, I'm Jeromie Jackson. I'm CEO and founder of CinderLabs. So I started my first security consultancy in '94, back when you can see I actually had hair. And then released this AI is the Next Internet book just in January of this year. And pretty heavily certed, previously SANS mentor for the CISSP curriculum, and I'm an author for CIO.com. So we're going to jump right on into the offensive side. So in this, so we do a lot of penetration testing. So that may entail, traditional pen testing, just like external, internal, and Wi-Fi, but we also do like physical clandestine pen testing, and the like. And so I want to show you one of the things that we're using for open source intelligence. So you can see here what this is N8N. If you're not familiar with N8N, it's basically an orchestrated AI system. And so you can see here at the top, all this workflow that's in green is what's demo safe. So these are things that we can grab from open source intelligence that We don't need authorization from the customer or prospect to grab that information. Should we be in an active engagement, then we do quite a bit more, the active scanning, pulling Nmap scans and things of that nature. But what I want to show you here, if you're not familiar with N8N, so basically all you need to do is put in a company name and the domain. And so this is going to kick off a orchestrated workflow. And so one thing to highlight here, and you can see as it's moving around, here's the AI system that it's reaching out to, and then it's going to run through all of these things that are interconnected. And so N8N is orchestrated. You can see how it's very much like a flow chart, how it goes from left to right, top to bottom, as opposed to an agentic AI system where you give it tools and it doesn't have a left to right. It just has a set of tools like in a toolbox, and it tries to figure out the best way to do things. So depending on the type of workflow you're working with, you may be working with one or the other of these. But this will take a while to run. So I'm going to show you basically the output of this is the recon report. So it automatically shows me the attack paths, the different types of systems that we found out there, the DNS records, things of that nature. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that there's a pretty cool site called Wiggle that allows you to use latitude and longitude and pull SSID or Wi-Fi information about the end user. And so that's what we got going on here. So again, as a red team or penetration test operator, this allows me to quickly consume a large amount of different types of open source intelligence and or intelligence from active scanning, send that through the AI agents, and then have them provide some analytical capabilities so that, it's basically having a cohort in crime, shall we say. So with that, this next piece that I wanted to show you, and so this kind of summarizes what we were just talking about. So this next video, this is about a 3-minute video. I put it in a video format as opposed to doing it live because it would take too long in a live environment. But I'll go ahead and run this. This is about a 3-minute video, and I'll just kind of describe it. So one thing here, you'll see there's a complex prompt that I'm basically asking it to do pen testing for me. And it said that it can't do it for me. It's basically guardrails stopped it. So here you'll see that now what I'm going to do is instead of having this complex chat that it can potentially push against the guardrails right away, I'm going to break my queries down independently. So here you can see I'm basically scanning for vulnerabilities on a machine, and it'll think about it a little while. It's going to go ahead and use multiple tools. So you may, if you're not that familiar with tooling, the majority of tooling are MCP tools that basically allow the AI to talk to different things, whether it may be your browser, Excel, email, things of that nature. And so you can see it's going ahead and doing a port scan, asking me a few different questions, and out comes the result of the report. So quickly allows me to understand the vulnerabilities associated with this endpoint device. And so I forgot to mention, but what I have running here is Kali with MCP tools connected to it. So if you're not familiar with Kali, it's basically a penetration tester's operating system. It's basically Linux with a pile of attacking tools. And so that's what we're using here. So it went ahead and so now I found those vulnerabilities. I said, go ahead and exploit the VSFTP daemon. So it's going to go ahead and try to exploit that automatically for me. You can see I'm not having to remember syntax or, jump into the MSF console or anything like that manually. It's going ahead and doing it right here for me. So you can think about scaling penetration tests both from a volume perspective as well as depth perspective. So penetration tests generally have a limited amount of time. And so, having a cohort, sitting right next to me to where I can run multiple tabs doing, multiple agentic things all at the same time provides me a lot of interesting capabilities as a single operator. And so here you can see that I went ahead and grabbed the loot file. And then one of the things that we found in the MCP tools that are out there for Kali currently, there wasn't a tool that allowed for an interactive shell. So CinderLabs, we went ahead and created that shell. So you can see I'm asking here now, let's go ahead and leverage that tool to give me a live interface. And it's going to go ahead and jump on through, and here in a second, we'll go ahead and see that interface come on up. Definitely been burning a lot of tool tokens. So one of the articles that I wrote for CIO Magazine about a month or so ago, they wanted me to write about one of the tools we're going to be showing you later today, Era. And yeah, so definitely Anthropic's been appreciating my funds. So here you can see the interface, and so from there, we're able to basically have an interactive session. So you can see that literally we went from, you know, scanning to exploitation all the way to an interactive shell without me having to do anything, then write, a couple commands or sentences, shall we say. So with that, we're going to transition over to defense. So, it's great to see things break, but especially from a pen tester side. But obviously, the majority of us are trying to secure our entities, and so let's talk about the defense side. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is most organizations don't really have an ability to really see what people are doing with their LLMs or AIs out in the wild. So a lot of people have created an acceptable use policy. Maybe they've done some awareness training, but they don't really have any technical ways to really understand what their users are doing. We see some people will try to, for example, deploy firewall rules should they deem that a certain, frontier AI is inappropriate or something like that. But obviously, that's not going to work if someone's at their house, for example, unless it's like a zero trust environment or something like that. And so with that, I want to show you uh, a tool that we created, again, related to AI that is what we call Shield. So Shield is basically a shadow AI firewall. So with this, basically it's a Docker instance. So you have complete data sovereignty. We have no access into it whatsoever. We just get information about obviously the subscriptions for subscriptions to the software. But the way this works is there's a Chromium extension. So with that Chromium extension, it basically you send it out to all your browsers. It'll work with anything other than Safari pretty much. And then if you're doing any type of, non-browser AI work, like you're using Claude's, native operating system or FAT client, shall we say, we have agents that'll allow us to pick up on that. And so once you deploy, then we have this AI service catalog. So the service catalog basically allows IT to describe what areas are sanctioned or what AI systems are sanctioned, which ones are not, and they can actively allow, block, or monitor. You can also add services. But one of the things that we definitely wanted to include was, everyone and their brother now has AI built into their software. So having the knowledge of being able to leverage the data loss prevention rules across everything that the browser's doing was very valuable. So you can see here, you just click this on or off to get access to that. And then what we have on the other side from a data loss prevention side, so you can see there's a bunch of basically data loss prevention rules. You define the disposition, whether you want to log, prompt, or block. You can override for certain domains if you want to. So let's say, for example, you're inputting a lot of uh, credit cards or social security numbers into something like Salesforce. You could override it with Salesforce. These are completely configurable. They're regular expressions. Wherever possible, we did try to implement things to mitigate false positives. So, for example, credit cards, they have to match a certain format, things of that nature. And also, you have the ability to create your own rules. And so, once you have that deployed, from an operator's perspective, if you were going to be using Shield's interface, this would be your interface, and so you can see basically, where the majority of the violations and overall data flows are coming in from. And if we look at, for example, here's social security numbers that got transmitted. And so here we're able to set the dispositions, so on and so forth. One other thing I'd highlight is you can see the amount of telemetry we're trying to get about on the endpoint. So the host name, the username, internal and external IP addresses, because it may be someone at their house, they may be at Starbucks, and so we wanted to have as much telemetry there as possible. With that being said, I would say the majority of our customers have some type of SIM or SOC that they're integrating with. So there's the capability of using these connectors. So we have in this instance 12 different connectors. So you can see lots of different ticketing systems and things of that nature. You'll see in the larger instance, we have about 36 different connectors. If there's one in here that you needed access to easily, it's easy for us to transition it over. And then the other thing is, I wanted to highlight that we're doing 15-day trials. So if you go to CinderLabs and hit this 15-day trial, all you have to do is load it up. It basically fill this out. It'll instantly give you access for 15 days. Again, it runs on a Docker container, so you could run this on your local laptop or the like. But that being said, I want to show you what the prompting looks like. So here, if I'm in ChatGPT, it comes up and basically I have it prompting for social security numbers. So I could either block and drop, or I could have it over, or basically if I wanted the customer to, override, then they can come in here and describe why they want the override. And you can see one of the things we found really valuable, and the people we've been working with have been finding a lot of value in, is a lot of organizations are still trying to figure out the ways in which they can use AI to improve their business. And so being able to get this insight from the end users as far as what they were doing inside of this that would cause this override makes it to where, it may be a valid work use case that you may want to reach out to the business unit for, or something of that nature. So let me switch on back here. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Jordan, and he's going to be demonstrating some of the things that we're seeing as far as interesting use cases for executing inside of the SOC. So take it away, Chris.
But Jeremy, I think you need to pass the presenter role
Yeah,
back.
there we go. I think good to go.
Go. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah, so what I'm going to show is some basic stuff. I'm going to first start talking about the SIM in general, right? So how do we see information on the defensive side? So Fluency uses a data fabric. So what a data fabric means is we're going to be collecting information from across your infrastructure, whether it's an HEC format, syslog format, API calls. The authentication closes on the left-hand side of the pipe. In the middle of the pipe, we're going to parse, and that's where we do our data enrichment. That's where we add things like GeoIP, reputation lookups. And then finally, we send it to either the event watch or a database. The event watch monitors it. It maintains behavioral analytics. And behavioral analytics allow us to say, hey, this person's browser changed, this person's location's different. It maintains a sliding window. So it's not the last occurrence like you would with a product like Devo, but it's like a 60-day or a 90-day window around the activity. When the activity triggers, it uses a technique called fault tolerance analysis, which means it believes that bad events occur in groups. And that's what we know from the reality. If you ever tell a story, it's more than one sentence. And that's what happens. So when we see something bad, usually we see this red. That marker means it's the first time for anybody in the infrastructure to actually get that alert. And then yellow means that for this particular user, blues with no markers means this is something they normally do. In this case here, once the cluster is created, clustering behavioral analytics reduce at about 80% just to start with. So when you think about 50,000 alerts, you're looking at like 20 to 15 that will get through behavioral analytics and clustering, 80% of 80%. And then what we're going to be removing after that is we go through it and the AI takes a look at it. And in this case here, the AI is going through a workflow. And then what it's doing is tier one, tier two work. And so it's going to come back and say, here's my summary of it. Was it valid and was it actionable? And those are the two things that a tier one analyst does. And then they're going to pass it on to tier two, who's going to do further investigation. And so we actually have a tier two capability on top of it. But I'm going to stop there. And what I'm going to talk about is what we call companion. And so what companion means is that we're not just going to look at the SIEM as a SIEM. We're going to look at the SIEM as a headless SIEM. And you just saw Kali Linux. Kali, I think during DEF CON is probably going to release a new version. They always do. But in this case here, JJ showed you that he could talk to it headless. And what headless means is that you wrap it with an MCP and then you talk to it with Claude or Codex or pretty much anything. Kimi, you name it, Quen. All these agentic agents can talk MCP. Uh, and the advantage here is that the MCP is going to have what we call non-deterministic logic. And so when you talk to it, it's going to interpret what you say, but how does that agentic agent know what you're doing? And that's the difference between an MCP and APIs. In MCPs, we're going to pull in the data, but we call our tools, and our tools are going to have descriptions, but we're going to pull in skills. So in Fluency Companion, right, we show you how you set up the MCP, and then skills. I can just download all my skills, but we're showing you what all the different skills do. And the skills push the knowledge from the backend into the agentic AI. So the agentic doesn't really know anything until you give it skills. Otherwise, it's guessing with the tools you give it. So now that you have these skills, we've moved the domain knowledge into your system, and you're going to add your own domain knowledge, right? It could be you as a user, but you might have other MCPs. You might be running Tenable One, you might be running SentinelOne Purple, and you can talk to all three of these products at the same time. And that gives you a little bit more power than one product by itself. But as we go into Claude, let me go back to CPP. So that's the LLM. The companion has all the skills, and we're going to actually post data. And we use the companion because of the speed of Claude or the speed of LLM. You saw it. JJ just went ahead and said, let me speed this up for you. And that's the problem with pretty much all the LLMs is they're fairly slow. Any big time user, even I've seen sales staffs do this, they'll maintain 3 to 4 tabs working at the same time, right? So Claude's not the quickest, but it gets a tremendous amount of work done. So anyway, so the LLM is going to talk to the MCP. The key to the MCP is that it's going to be deterministic. So we don't want security to be non-deterministic. We want it to be very repetitive. So all those functions and features are going to be deterministic. And we go back to the companion and we take a look at packaging. You're going to see that all these skills, like 20 skills, use 75 different tools, right? And the same thing later on. We can say the investigator, these investigate 122 different tools. So this relationship between the tools and the LLM is fairly important. And that's really what makes one headless system stronger than another. And in the security industry, you very rarely see MCP, but it's becoming the thing to do. Salesforce is doing it. Microsoft is doing this. HubSpot is doing it. So this is becoming the way in which people are now interfacing with their data instead of going through the traditional interface. But that means that all that knowledge was in the interface needs to be in the MCP or it needs to be in the skills that you're using. And then finally, when you break it down, there's going to be APIs under that. So when Jeremy showed you what he was doing, he was bypassing the fact that he put a lot of tremendous domain knowledge into it. So when he's using, we like to call it N8N, N8N, right? N8N allows you to coordinate the APIs, but how to coordinate the APIs, that's Jeremy's brain power, right? That's the AI's brain power. So when we go into Claude and we just connect, we go into our settings, we attach it. It goes through the things. You go into skills. You now load the skills. Then you can say, hey, you know what? What is Fluency and the exposed to our trial site? So I say, well, what can it do? And the AI, it's going to read the announcement of the MCP. So the MCP can tell the AI, oh, this is what you do. I can do health, I can do cases, I can do billing, resources, CISO work, compliance work, right? Onboarding, all these things it knows. And then you just talk to it like you talk to an intern. You'd say, hey, you know what? Give me a health report. And it takes a look and it shows you what's up, what's down. I can say, give me a monthly report. And you're going to see that the monthly report goes to a skill and it yanks up these skills, and it's just not one thing. Look at all the different things. It's breaking it down to chapters, right? Root causes, MITRE attacks, operational exposure, gapping, risk analysis, right? These are all in the monthly report. Nice, right? But how do I get it out of the monthly report? Simple. Present it as an HTML executive report, throw out charts, analytics, right? I could say do it in PDF. I just said do it in HTML, and you get an HTML output, right? This is fairly nice. I can make it even more professional. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But the key here is that now you have a monthly report. And I could go back and I can say AI, you know, that's wonderful. Schedule it. Schedule it to the first of every month, and we'll schedule it for you. So then you can tell it, you can give it a skill on how to email or how to in our case here, push to companion. And so in the first of every month, the report will show up in your interface, or it can be emailed to you. Better off, it gets pushed and the link gets emailed to you. So nothing sensitive ever goes through the mail, right? Now, where's the power? Because people could say, you know what, I could have done this. I could have coded this. But what happens if I turn around and say, compare the 2 months? I'm halfway right now, I'm at the end of July. Compare this month to last month. So comparison is a very common thing that sheets have a hard time doing because I don't know what you're going to compare ahead of time. I could have said, compare this to last December, compare this same time last year, compare it against all three of those. And the AI starts analyzing that traffic or that request, and it winds up producing a brand new report, right? And it looks nothing like the previous report, right? In this case here, it has the same chapter and same structure, but now the AI is comparing June to July, and it's going through this process on your behalf, right? So now, if you think about it, most people talk about what I started talking about when doing AI analysis, right? There's the big AI threat coming in. How do I analyze it? To tell you the truth, we're going to analyze it the same way. The zero-day attacks occurred before AI occurred. We're still going to be looking for its tells. Phishing occurred. We're still going to be looking for its tells. The question is, can I see them? Can I correlate them? Can I highlight them better? That's what the AI analysis is doing. But then can I manage that infrastructure? Can I scale it? Right? Those are the questions people don't ask. So I could pull this stuff together. I could say, you know what? I really like this report. And then I can give it to Claude design and say, make it so it's sexy, right? And it can take a format that I already have and make it into a very presentable format, into a PDF that's repeatable, that can be sent out at the executive level. Okay. Finally, as I go through Claude, I could ask it questions like run against a NIST assessment, a CISA assessment, a FICA assessment, right? If you're in South Africa. So then it will once again produce reports. This time here, the AI is smart enough not only to look for is it technically there, it's looking for the evidence that it's there. And then it actually considers the tool I'm using. It actually goes, hey, what's Fluency doing? Right? Did the people log in to review the data? Are they doing it daily? Right? How quickly were the admins reviewed? All that stuff gets considered when it starts analyzing the data, right? And so it's showing you where the weaknesses are, where the gaps are, where's the partials. And this is just from the perspective before I even begin the analysis of governance over where's my documentations and how do I fuse this together with things that I can't see inside the SIM. So I'm going to stop there because I feel, JJ, you can add to it, is the governance around the information that we can collect, both electronically and through our infrastructure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Chris. All right. So let's see. I'm going ahead and got just a couple quick slides to show you, and then we're going to jump into uh, another tool. So needless to say, we're seeing a lot of what you'll hear called governance theater out there these days. Everyone's trying to be an AI security and governance expert, but in reality, most people are still, really trying to come up to speed. Most people are looking at, developing policies and looking towards the basically the governance and regulatory frameworks as opposed to really being in the trenches. And so one of the things that we've developed is you may have heard of a framework from Gardner called TRISM. It's basically a framework for trust, risk, and information security management of AI systems. And so we went ahead and built out a 100% TRISM compliant application. And so here you can see, again, this is runs in a Docker container. Probably at some point we will make it SaaS, but a lot of people want to be able to maintain this inside of their own environment. I know some people that are on the call are MSSPs, and so you'll see that this supports multi-tenancy. And so if we go ahead and jump into one of these MSSPs and jump into their tenants, we're going to see what we call ERA, and so the AI risk assessment tool. So with this, there's three different ways that organizations are onboarded. One, you can see this jumpstart capabilities. So if, for example, if you're a startup and you needed to comply with like CMMC and SOC 2, you could go through this jumpstart, tell it which frameworks you need to comply to, and as soon as you execute it, it's going to go ahead and build out all of your policies and all of your controls that you need to align to those frameworks. Currently, today, we have 17 different frameworks that it supports and fully crosswalks. The second way that people can onboard is we do a lot of complementary CIS assessments. If you're not familiar, the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls, about 160 or so individual controls. We sit down, have a very frank conversation about where you're aligned, where you're partially, and where you're not aligned. And it comes back with a comprehensive report with a prioritized set of recommendations for remediation. That's all done through an Excel spreadsheet. And so we're able to import that Excel spreadsheet directly into this system. The third way to do it is through the wizard, and I'm going to show you what the wizard looks like. So with these different frameworks, we'll just go ahead and reassess. And so when we jump into these questions, if we say yes, that means that we do have that control. If we say partial or no, that means that we don't. So if I say yes, it goes into the control and evidence area. If I say no, it goes into the risk register. And so if I go ahead and write this out here, now we have all our controls. So with that, I want to jump back a little bit. Now that we've implemented all our controls, we're going to go ahead and define our AI systems. So if you're, again, familiar with the Gardner TRISM, here we're able to create full-on model cards. So here you describe where the model came from, how it's used, how it's been trained, if you've done any weighting, who owns it, things of that nature. And then the other thing, auditors, like for the EU AI Act and the like, they want to understand the data flows through that AI system. And so here you can see an example of doing sentiment analysis where we're pulling an API with Apollo. Apollo is a source for leads in sales. And then we're transforming it. We're saying that basically we're running it through our CRM and making sure that the prospects or the leads are not already in our system. And then we're running it through ERA's guardrails, which I'll show you here in just a second, which allows us to see bidirectionally what's happening inside of this transaction. And then we describe the AI model itself, what kind of outputs we're getting out of it, and where that output's going. And so with that, then if we look over at the guardrails, So the guardrails are basically work like a proxy. So you'll have some type of application, that may be a chat bot, it may be an N8N and get, workflow. It could be, React, pick your flavor. And then you basically proxy through the Era gateway. And so with this, we're able to deploy rules bidirectionally to, again, look at like data loss prevention and the like. But you'll see that some of these policies are unique to more of this type of deployment or use case. So, for example, looking at like prompt injections or looking at like there's toxicity or violence and self-harm, things of that nature. Generally you wouldn't be looking at that inside of DLP rules, but it makes a lot of sense when you're talking about how people are interfacing with your LLM. So now that you understand the AI system that you understand the data flows, obviously you need to be able to test it. So we have several different types of ways that we test. So the red team assessments are basically prompt manipulation. So it's a battery of prompts that are continuously updated that try to basically break the guardrails of the LLM. I think I have enough time to give you a quick comment about that. So, one of the things that we do is we use AI to help us look at our prospects for our outbound prospecting functions. And one time I reached out to a credit union and asked, I noticed that you're looking to go through a acquisition. It might be interesting to have someone like myself come in and do a penetration test, maybe a gap assessment so that you understand the tech stack that you're acquiring. And they reached right back out, frantic, trying to figure out where I had learned about the acquisition. So I told them, the way we basically do our research, we were using ChatGPT at the time. So I told them I'd try to find the source, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. I couldn't find it in ChatGPT, but come to find out, it was actually a valid statement. And they said they had not released it anywhere. And so, I was basically told the prospect, it either hallucinated and it was actually right, or more than likely, there was cross-tenant contamination. So I've seen that in the real. So just a side note on that. But with that, bias and fairness testing as well as explainability testing is really important. So these are standard battery tests. And so you may have a high quality LLM, but based on the types of RAG data that you've given it or trained it on, it may start to have bias or fairness issues. And so we're able to run those tests against this environment. Also, web assessments, needless to say, a lot of these are like Chat GPT or, chat systems and the like. And so we're able to run credentialed and uncredentialed assessments against that. But so now we kind of stood up our compliance framework. We stood up our AI systems. We described how they're being used. We've tested them. Now, obviously, we need to align to compliance. So remember, we walked through those questions, and the ones that we said that we satisfy, they go into this control and evidence area. And so here, we're able to document evidence for the auditors and for, whatever additional purposes, cyber insurance and the like. So, you could upload the evidence, have URLs, you can add notes and the like, but you may have heard or you may be interested or be actively looking at more like continuous compliance. That's where a lot of people are headed these days. So you can see this collect evidence button. So if I go down into the integrations, we have quite a few different integrations. From a connectors perspective, it looks like today we have 37. So what we've done with these is these are basically APIs that we can tap into. We've mapped what the API's telemetry provides to the controls frameworks that we support inside of the system so that with a click of a button, we're instantly able to pull all the data from these APIs and gather the evidence for upcoming audit, internal audit, whoever needs that information. On the opposite side of compliance, then obviously we have risk. And so one of the things when we onboard somebody, we will ask about the NAIC codes that they align to, their asset size, and a few other details about their entity themselves. And I'll show you why that's important here in a second. But inside of the risk register, remember this is anywhere we said we're partially or not aligned to whatever the controls are we need based on the frameworks that we're dealing with. We need to obviously triage or remediate. One of the things auditors hate is if you know you have an issue and you've marked it as on the risk register and that risk register stays dormant. So we're really trying to mitigate that here. So you can see you can associate this to an owner, a due date, or a view date, so on and so forth. And so that really helps put everything on the map as far as keeping things in check. There's a full workflow capability inside of here that it'll send emails. I'll also show you the governance calendar here in a second. But while I'm in the risk area, I also wanted to show you this. So, especially financial entities, I know there's some on the call today. They're always interested in the numbers, shocker, right? And so, as opposed to subjective, they want some type of numerical value to describe the risk. And so, here, especially because we're so close to the tooling inside of the environment and as well as the risk registers, we're able to determine estimated annual loss based on Monte Carlo frameworks or mm, formulas, shall we say. Equally, as far as risk reduction, you can see here, based on the types of risks that we see in the environment, should we remediate those risks, how significant that's going to be towards reducing our risk. So really useful from a risk perspective, from a cyber insurance perspective, overall governance. The other thing I wanted to show you is the governance component. And so here, like I mentioned, there's two ways that you can deploy policy in here. If you don't have policy, then you can kick it out through the jumpstart that I mentioned. The opposite is, let's say you're an existing organization, you already have a set of policies that have been approved and endorsed. Then you can ingest it with the AI ingestion capability. It'll use artificial intelligence to take your policies, them to the control frameworks, and build them into the system for you. And so inside of these policies, if you need any details, it quickly, let me show you one other portal here real quick. It'll show you. Uh, It'll show you actually all the details and fully editable. So definitely very useful. I can tell you, I've had to do a lot of engagements in the past where people will hire us just to do the policies. And, those are pretty significant engagements, especially if you have to go from the ground up. Whereas we're able to execute right out the door. I did want to show one other thing before I move to the vendor management. I'm going to jump back over to the integrations. And so you can see inside of here, we have webhooks similar to what we have inside of Shield. So if you have some type of issue that you need to instantiate, like an N8N workflow or something like that, you're able to do that here. The other thing that's really valuable is this cloud providers. So we're able to connect to your cloud provider and understand about, cloud trails and all your configs inside of your cloud. And so back on the testing components where you may have heard of there's a whole industry cloud security posture management, CSPM. We're able to provide that type of functionality direct inside of the tool since we already have access. The other thing I definitely wanted to highlight is, especially we're finding in the credit union sector, the NCUA in particular, and other entities, but very much so the NCUA has been almost more interested in what the vendors do with your data as opposed to what the credit unions do with your data as far as what the AI systems are using that information for and how they're being stored, manipulated, transformed. And so we have a entire vendor management capability built into this as well. So you're able to basically create a set of vendors. You come in here and set up their assessments. If it's something like an attested report, you can just ask for those attestations. If it's something that they have to self-audit, where they have to answer the questions themselves, you're able to do that. You're also able to add your own additional questions if you need to. One of our recent customers also had the need. They're a large car dealership. They had in the back of their information security policy that they had an addendum that their vendors needed to sign, and so we're able to provide that as well. But with that, once everything's connected, then you're able to enable and invite people into a portal. And so this allows the vendors a centralized area to submit all their evidence. So it allows us to have single source of authority when it comes to all things vendor related. And let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, good on time. So let me just see if there was anything else that stuck out here that I really wanted to show you guys before we open it up for questions. And so this, you might be interested in this. So this is all the crosswalks. So, oh, one of the things that I didn't mention, or I guess a couple things that I didn't mention. One, in relation to the policies deploy least privilege. So if you say you have, let's say you have three different frameworks you're working with, and one of them says that you need an 8-character password, the other says you need a 12-character password, the policy is going to lean towards the 12-character password. So it's going to take the most restrictive approach. And then opposite on another thing, I showed you the blocking capabilities inside a shield, but I didn't show you. You also have the ability to do those same DLP rules against basically OCR or uploads. So if someone's uploading like a doc file or a CSV file or like a picture of a social security number, we're able to leverage those DLP rules there as well. And so with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions, Paul. Uh, unless you can think of anything else that I haven't covered yet.
No, ladies and gentlemen, that was quite a bit that was covered. Before I open it up for questions, I guess what I would like to understand is there any component of this presentation that you would like a quick recap on? And I think everybody's muted. JJ, you might need to unmute folks so that they can, or make it so that they can unmute themselves to be able to add color, or go ahead and type it into the chat. While we're waiting for that to take place, I can go ahead and pepper in a question. What are the most impactful use cases you have seen for error beyond alert triage? Things like vCISO support, TRISM alignment, or rapid control and policy alignment.
Yeah, so I would say a couple things. We've had a lot of interest in people wanting to use the tool more for a lot of people are out there providing fractional or vCISO type services. So I've seen MSSPs as well as individuals using it in that capacity. Another use case, I may have mentioned it earlier, but startups. We're seeing, there's a lot of different SaaS solutions out there these days that, they're rapidly building and needing to go to market. Generally security is like, oh yeah, we need to get our SOC. So we've seen the jumpstart capability being really valuable. So, what used to take months to get someone ready for SOC assessment with an assessor, they're able to do it really quickly.
Very nice. While I'm panning over to the next screen, can I get a show of thumbs up the number of people that have joined us for today's webinar that have experienced any of the products in a headless architecture? Just give me a thumbs up if you're paying attention and you've worked with the headless architecture that Chris mentioned during the defensive mechanism.
Just Jeremy.
Just if you haven't, if you have not experienced the headless architecture, I am a strong proponent of that is going to be the next evolution in software over the next probably 6 to 9, maybe 12 months. Chris, I'm going to let you pepper in that while I go look for another question. Anyone
Yeah.
else?
I'll say that before we had a trip to Africa back in May, and we were talking to one of the MSPs Paul had introduced us to. We gave like a 50-minute discussion over cutting edge SIM stuff. And at the very end, we showed him the headless. And the guy looked at Paul and he said, Paul, why do you waste 50 minutes of my time? And when we went on our trip to Africa, I didn't expect to talk AI. And I think it was every conversation, and every conversation was not AI investigation, but how does AI help me manage better? And it became a conversation of headless because headless is more of a management need than anything else. If you think about all the things I talked about, reporting, analysis, repetitive tasks, there's a lot of stuff we do at the management level. And I think that, to tell you the truth, the biggest gain in the headless architecture is going to be the fractional CISO. It's going to be the people that have to get organizations up and running because to have hardworking staff that can do that grunge work that AI can do is so important. But it still has to get access to the data and access to the domain knowledge. And so architectures, headless architectures, abnormal in the security world. It's growing everywhere else, for the exception of Cali.
So Chris, this next question is kind of right up your alley. How has cowork changed the way your analysts collaborate during an active incident compared to jumping between email, Slack, and ticketing systems?
Uh, Paul, it's like in Star Trek when the doctor starts cutting people up and Bones looks at him and said, "That's so barbaric." And the reality is that the idea of analysts going through and searching is barbaric. We had a customer, unfortunately, about a month ago call us up. They got hacked very badly. Um, and we attached this to the system. And because we can pull in like 7 days of past history, the system pulled in 7 days past history, automatically highlighted the attack, highlighted all the entry points, the activity of outgoing, what were the shot. All the work was done in minutes, right?
Oh,
And it was crazy. Yeah, then it began the work of responding, and that's going to accelerate. But the reality is, it's barbaric to think that you're going to have people look at logs. I mean, I remember back in the late 1990s, I was out of all places, Paris, the Paris Golf Club, doing a speech over AI and cutting edge analysis. And Mudge, Peter Zacko, was in the audience. And Peter, literally, before I walked on stage, told everybody he would never look at a log in his life, right? So if you think that you're going to get the smartest people to do an IR and investigate, you're not going to get those people. They don't want to do that work. Okay.
right.
So that grunge work, it's grunge work, but to tell you the truth, we know how to do it. We know how to engineer it. I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes is that movie, The Martian, right? When he gets stuck on Mars and he says, "I'm going to engineer the crap out of this." I'm being euphemistically correct. The thing is that that's what we're doing right now. There's a lot of engineering work right now, and most people are seeing the AI side of it. But what they're not seeing is how did Jeremy create what he created? It's engineering. There's a significant amount of engineering, and that is changing everything. So if you go back to, is AI and all this stuff impactful? How's it impacting the analysis? It's changing everything, Paul. That yes, there's still need to review stuff. There's still QA. There's still reviewing of things, and there's still the setting up the systems and everything else like that. But we were overworked before. I still haven't slept, and AI is not making my life easier. It's making it more hectic, right? I sleep between when my tokens get refreshed, and then I find out I can pay to get them refreshed. So basically, I'm an insomniac, and that's the new reality is that there's a ton of work to do. We're not going to be unemployed anytime soon, at least for another week, and there's tons of work. And the point is that the analysis work these people did, they always pushed it on. I can tell you some of the best analysts out there never really looked at the stuff. They always had other people do it and they put it together and they did the talk. Um, it's not really a lost art. It's an art that AI can pick up. It's a question of due diligence. It's a question of pushing things together. We have a lot of tech already. I talked about UEBA. I talked about fault tolerance analysis. There's tons of algorithms that are untouched, and now they're going to get touched. All right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have 5 minutes left, folks. I can fire off another question. This one would be related to ERA. Before you part ways, please know that we'll be sending out a copy of the webinar along with the questionnaire that'll come from Jeromie Jackson and CinderLabs. Before I pivot into the next question, anybody have anything else they want to add? 4 minutes left. We'll wrap it up with one question. Jeremy, this one is for you. How does Shield handle environments with a mix of data sources, cloud, on-prem, endpoint, without creating noise that burns out analysts?
Yeah, so I would say, a lot of it has to do with false positive reduction. So as far as the quality of the rules, there's been a lot of time devoted to minimizing those false positives. And then on the opposite side, I would say the additional visibility is really being used for people to understand, use cases. As far as deployment goes and noise, one of the things that we always recommend is the data loss prevention rules go in as log only. So if you, for example, go to the website like I showed you, and I'll be sending in the email, if you download that Docker instance and deploy it and push it out to your users, it's going to be in log only mode by default. So you gain the visibility without any type of interruption to the user's workflow. And then obviously you can move into a blocking mode as appropriate.
Awesome. That I think is going to go ahead and wrap us up. We're at 11:57, coming up on 11:58. Want to say thank you to everybody for attending the webinar. It was a jam-packed lot of information. So please reach out if you have any questions or you'd like to see more on a specific topic within the webinar.
Awesome. Well, sounds good, guys. And just FYI, we are looking to do these on a more consistent basis. So if you have anything that you want us to more deep dive into, would love to get your feedback on the survey that I'll be sending out here in just short. Make it a great day, guys. Thanks again.